Hi everyone, you're watching the Virtual Amicus and I'm Jay Lodha. Well, the topic for today's discussion is judicial clerkship. Now, what is judicial clerkship? Who all can apply for a judicial clerkship? What generally is the duration of a clerkship? Now, how are questions such as how are successful applicants absorbed in the esteemed chamber of honorable judges? Is it on the basis of vacancies or seniority of judges or both? And how many judicial clerks are usually assigned to honorable judges? What is the remuneration look like? So there are so many questions that keep cropping up. So today we decided to seek assistance from two distinguished, eminent, and highly respected lawyers. So today we are in conversation with Dr. Amit George and Mrs. Remya Raj. And just to give you all a brief introduction about our amicus for today's session. Amit George is an advocate practicing before the High Court of Delhi and the Supreme Court of India and frequently appears before various arbitral tribunals in domestic and international arbitrations. He read law at Nalsar, Hyderabad, and went on to earn an LLM with merit from the University of London, international programs with a specialization in international dispute resolution, and a PhD in law from National Law University, Delhi. He started his career as a law clerk with Justice Rajiv Sahai Endlaw at the High Court of Delhi back in 2009 and 10. And just to give you all a brief introduction about the other amicus on today's session, well, that's right. There are two distinguished and esteemed lawyers on our channel. Mrs. Remya Raj is an advocate on record at the Honorable Supreme Court of India and an alumna of Government Law College, Mumbai. Her practice spans white collar defense and investigations, property disputes, consumer protection, environmental law, and public interest litigation. From 2019 to 2021, she served as a law clerk to Honorable Mrs. Justice Rekha Palli at the High Court of Delhi. So thank you so much, Remya and Dr. Amit sir, for taking out time, for readily saying yes, for doing a session on this really very important topic, which has not been covered so far. Well, I've been recording for sessions for over 3 years now for judicial clerkship. I personally feel is one of the most important topics that have unfortunately not been touched so far. So, sir and ma'am, anything that you wish to say about our channel before we quickly start with our much anticipated Q&A session?
Yeah, hi. So, Jay, thank you so much for having me on the channel. And I know you've been quite consistent with this. It's not easy to keep something like this going over a period of almost 3 years. There's a lot of initial enthusiasm, which is usually lost in the process. But you've been at it, and with the wide range of topics that you've covered in your show so far, it is, in that sense, quite a rich repository of experiences, lived experiences from practitioners across the board. So, yes, thank you so much for having me here. It's a privilege. Thank you.
He said it so well because it is something that people start on a whim and then they lose touch with it, because obviously this is a very, very demanding profession. So this channel deserves a lot of commendation for its persistence. More importantly, I think access is everything, and as a first gen lawyer, I think we can all agree that information is everything. So when we have someone who knows and has lived it and is telling us something about it, it's a lot more helpful than advice from those who haven't really been through the grind. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and it's always great to see so many of my seniors and my juniors from GLC Mumbai, and to know what they've been up to. It's nice. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for all the kind words. Really means a lot to me and my team. So let's quickly start with our Q&A segment. So question number one coming your way. What is judicial clerkship?
Yeah, so Remy, I'll just take that. Basically, what I would say in the most straightforward manner possible is that if you graduate from law school, the standard career path that you would envision if you wanted to litigate would be to join the chambers of a litigating lawyer or a disputes firm, etc. So these litigating lawyers or that firm that you join would require certain assistance from you at that level. Someone you just qualified. So largely the work that you would be doing then would be in the sense of research, helping, maybe doing basic drafts, being in court when those matters are called out, maybe doing your passovers, your adjournments, maybe help brief senior advocates who might be engaged in the matter. So that's generally the career path for a young lawyer who gets into litigation. Now, but when we get into litigation, we do see that there is always the other side across the bar. There is the bench. And in the bench, of course, the individuals who constitute the bench also would require assistance in terms of the judicial output that they have to bring out on a daily basis. Now, this is relatively newer in our country. It's, of course, had a much larger or a much longer sort of legacy in certain other jurisdictions. But for judges also, in terms of the daily work of adjudication that they undertake, they would require assistance from young professionals who would then be ready and willing to join their chambers. So a judicial clerkship, the word clerkship in our country suddenly generally has certain different connotations.
Yes.
But judicial clerkship effectively, and therefore you have some like Delhi High Court, which in fact says law researcher come judicial clerk.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, sort of maybe remove that, stigma which is attached. We don't have, in that sense, dignity of labor so much in our country. So maybe it's because of that. So basically, what you are required to do is effectively devil with that particular judge and help in all manner of things that are required to be able to effectively discharge the judicial function. So you are, of course, required to help with research. You may be required to help with proofreading. When it comes to drafts, judges have very different outlooks towards it. There are certain judges who will encourage, say, draft orders or draft judgments to be generated. There are some who do not encourage that at all. They would do the draft on their own and only expect you to help with the proofreading, the research, and of course, to fill in the gaps or the holes in terms of the record, etc. So it is in that sense quite a hectic sort of like a scope of work, because you are required to not only match the hours that a judge does in our judicial system, which is in that sense quite extensive, but also toe that line of responsibility which in fact emanates to the judge. So all aspects of it, you will have to ensure that you are there for the entirety of the time, that you engage with the record of each of the cases that the judge deals with, of course, engage with the law and the way it evolves, which is quite rapid in our country. And more importantly, you will also have to therefore keep that reticence which your colleagues at the bar may not have to in those initial years, because you're with the judge. So obviously you need to ensure that you keep that confidentiality, you keep the discipline. And in that sense, you also have to be conscious of that divide, in that sense, where you do not mingle to the extent that you would if you were, say, in a litigation chamber or otherwise. So in that sense, you are, let's say, seconded with the judge, and all of the trappings of that position in terms of the responsibility do come to you. So I mean, it's that. Imagine you're working with a lawyer. That's what the lawyer requires. That's what you do. You work with a judge. That's what the judge's profile requires. So that's what you do. So it's basically, a judicial clerkship is nothing but helping a judge perform his or her functions for the day in the most efficient manner that they possibly can. That's pretty much
Basically assisting a judge to discharge his judicial function in the most efficient way.
correct. Correct.
And it's a fluid role. I mean, like Amit said, because every judge's priority would change on how they would want to dispense their duties and functions. So, depending on what the judge's priority is, your role as a judicial clerk just becomes that of a facilitator. And I think one thing that I feel like can be added, which was true in my experience, when I used to see all the offices spread across the Delhi High Court, I would see that a lot of work also revolved around being a bridge between the judges' team of, very efficient stenographers, and there are a lot of people that make a judge's office work. So just being a bridge between that and the judge's judicial functions, and a lot of judges have administrative functions. So, you have to help them with that also, because they have committees, they have inquiries going on. Some judges, are a part of the coffee posa hearings. So, it's kind of an exciting position to be in, because you never know where it takes you. So all you need to show up is, you just need to show up with competence and skills, and you then have to trust the process and see where it's taking you and what all you get to experience.
Wonderful. No, so wonderful to see the two of you starting your careers as judicial clerks. So, there's so much value that you've added to your practice now because of the experience that you've gained there. So now, going ahead with our next question, at what stage of your LLB undergraduation course did you decide to apply for a judicial clerkship?
So I started with litigation first, and then I shifted to doing a clerkship, because I worked with some really efficient practitioners. They were in the Supreme Court, and it was nice. And because worked a certain way and they had so many different kinds of matters. After seeing it, I just wanted to broaden my perspective. And it really makes you curious, when you go and stand in court every day and you're standing for that long with the judge, it makes you want to know what is going on behind the scenes. And I'm better for it because it made me a much better practitioner. It made me a more compassionate practitioner, I would say, because lawyers are quick to critique. And it's nice to know the human who's sitting in that chair and what all they give up to push our case. It's easy to talk about when statistics are involved. It's easy to talk about, oh, itna pendency hai and this and that. But the truth is that there is a human being sitting on that chair, and there are a lot of familial responsibilities and work responsibilities they're trying to balance.
Yeah.
So you just become a little bit more paced when you look at that judge and you say, okay, I can also appear before this person with grace, so that I can facilitate justice with, and instead of being waiting for them to pronounce judgments, I can be an officer of the court in the truest sense.
So, as Remya mentioned, that entire concept of, you being more rounded off as a professional once you experience how it is on the other side. So, your question in the context of when do you actually apply for it? Frankly speaking, when you are near that process of graduation, as in when you arrive at that juncture, you can always do that. I applied for it. In fact, after I graduated, I came back to Delhi from Nalsar, and I had a senior from law school who had undertaken a clerkship in the past with a Delhi High Court judge who highly recommended it. So I waited around, looked for a vacancy, and then I found it. So frankly speaking, I was told by somebody it's a good experience. I really don't think I thought about it so much in terms of whether it would actually help me. But so therefore, when I got into it, it was amazing. So as Amir mentioned, it gives you like a very holistic view of what practice is all about. And in terms of timeline, as I said, it varies from person to person. For instance, in the Supreme Court now, you have to write an exam for it. So I think you're allowed to do that if you are just graduating, or of course, there are people who also write after maybe a year or two of having graduated. In the Delhi High Court, usually you have people, fresh graduates who apply, but then you also have a lot of people who maybe, let's say, worked in litigation for a year or two or three, and then decided to, come and be a law clerk. The only thing is, in most high courts or in the Supreme Court, I think there is an upper cap that you cannot have more than, I think, 5 or 7 years of work experience as a lawyer or post-qualification experience when you apply. So there is that sort of an upper cap. But otherwise, within that range, you can apply whenever you feel you're ready.
Wonderful. So who all can apply for a judicial clerkship, and what generally is the duration of it?
So, frankly speaking, the bare minimum is that you must have, in that sense, graduated certified course, like either a 3 or a 5-year LLB. That's the basic requirement. And of course, at some point in time, you would also be required to enroll with a relevant bar council. You are allowed to possibly join, but that is always subject to the condition that you do get enrolled at a particular point in time. But that's basically, I think, the bare minimum, subject to correction. Initially, for instance, the Supreme Court, a long time back, there were certain regulations that you must be from an accredited law school to be able to even apply. That was never there in the Delhi High Court. But then there was some litigation. I believe Justice Rajiv Shagdar, had struck down that requirement as being arbitrary. And that, of course, opened it up for graduates from law schools across the country. So as it stands today, I don't think there is any particular requirement. I'm told some high courts have a requirement that you must be enrolled with that state bar council of that particular high court. Aside from those, basic technical local jurisdictional requirements, I don't think there is anything over and above a basic LLB or a BLLB requirement.
So
No, and I think Delhi High Court has also made it essential for you to have enrolled with a bar council. That's a must now. It's evolved over time, I think. When I joined in 19, they wanted an enrollment to be there so that you can be formally an LR.
Correct. So that's pretty much it.
Yes, so very well. Going ahead with our next question. Now, talking about clerkship offered by Honorable Supreme Court, is there a notification issued by Honorable Supreme Court, or in case of an High Court administration notifying the vacancies? And how are applicants selected? Is there an entrance test, or is there an interview that is conducted for the same?
I think Supreme Court now has obviously it is a very popular exam now to give. Now kids actually when they graduate they actually have this exam in the forefront of their mind with good reason because it's a great place to get your first exposure to law.
Correct.
And it's a very demanding exam as well. It's not an easy one. So that's the Supreme Court. But with the High Court, I think the High Court is still very fluid in how it gets its LRs. You can go to a judge's chambers and apply through their office or, word of mouth. I think it's still a little informal that way, which is why I think it keeps it interesting because everyone may not be able to perform so well in an entrance exam. And clerkship has always been such a wonderful opportunity, which I really don't think, law is not really always about intelligence and the ability to write an exam. It is a lot more than that. It requires a different kind of intellect. So keeping it, I'm happy that the High Court doesn't have an entrance exam. I don't know what they're going to do next. But I straight away went to the judges' chambers and I applied. And in fact, I had, once I decided I want to do a clerkship, I went and sat in the courtroom of each and every judge in the Delhi High Court and I observed them and I dropped my resume, but I made it a point to observe them for a good 1 hour so that I could understand how the judge works, what's their style of, functioning, to understand better which judge would benefit from having me around them. So I think that's something that I would encourage lawyers to do, especially when you're about to apply to someone. Know what kind of judgments and what kind of subjects that this particular judge deals with, and if it's a judge that you feel you'll fit well in the office of, because that's also something. It's an important post, but it's not something that you should take very lightly. So, when you're going there, at least your basic, bare minimum research of who is this person and what kind of matters they deal with and how they deal with someone are important things that you should know before you decide I'm going to apply to this person, because they're investing time in you and you're investing time in them. So it has to be a good match, in my opinion.
Great. So just to add to that, I would just highlight the lack of due diligence at my end, in contrast to what Remya just said. So when I was, of course, told that there's a vacancy in the Office of Justice and Law, of course, it became highly recommended. He was a doyen on the civil side before he got elevated. But in the sense of my due diligence, I went to the High Court website. I still remember when I first heard his name, and I looked at his photograph, that typical mugshot you have. And I looked at that photograph, and from the way he smiled, it didn't seem like he was very strict. Seemed like.
That's funny because Justice in-law is one of the most. He has very high standards of a law researcher.
As you can see, my due diligence standards are very poor, so so why not? Seems cool enough. And then
I have so many friends who worked with him, and he, the kind of what you see in his work is what you see everywhere with him.
And I'll tell you, as an aside, so that work ethic, the work ethic that he expects, it's so strict. I still remember, so 5th year of law school, I think a lot of you will empathize. 5th year is largely spent doing, a lot of stuff but the law. Exams and seminar papers, you make your way through. So I just, spent that last year mostly just reading up philosophy, everything, science fiction, all of that, what I wanted to do. And then I end up here and I'm like, all right, we'll just work our way through. So on day one, Justice Enlaw asked me to do some research work. So very nonchalantly, I basically asked him, by when is it due? Now, that was a bad question to ask. I didn't know. So on day one, I asked him, so when is this due? And he was doing something on the file. For 2 minutes, he kept doing what he did. Then suddenly he looked up from that, looked at me point blank, and he answered my question by saying, yesterday. And he put it down.
Cinematic.
So after that, I never bothered asking when is the research due. It was understood.
Wow. I would be petrified.
So therefore, as I said, that lack of due diligence, the first 1 week, I felt the after effects of that. But yes, Absolutely right. So I got lucky, I got a great mentor. But Remya's right. You should be careful. You should know who you are applying to, because you're going to spend a lot of time with that person. And as Remya said, it's not just the judge, there is also a human being at play. So both factors. Somebody may be a great judge, right? But you may not, in that sense, have that sort of, let's say, connect with that person. You can always never be sure. But when you sit in court, you sort of do gauge the individual. So yes, that's quite important, as Remya mentioned.
So basically, if depending on the vacancies that are available in the particular judge's court, notification is issued to that effect, and thereafter the applicants apply.
Only with the Supreme Court, but with the High Court, it's a lot more fluid. And
Not
Jay, also, I have to tell you that, how many, because you said vacancies, right? How many vacancies there are, it depends from judge to judge. Some judges don't want, like Justice Muralidhar, I think, only had two LRs because he was a lot more self-sufficient that way. So some judges, it's not about self-sufficiency really, it's also about how a judge likes to work. So a lot of judges want to, give one thing to one person. So they would rather have four people with them. So it goes anywhere between 1 to 4 LRs a judge can have. And, it's really about increasing responsibilities. Like I told you, if someone has an administrative side of responsibilities, their day just becomes so much more packed because they don't just have to do court from 10 o'clock to 4:30. They also then have to go on to inquiries and administrative work, and that is too much for one person to bear. So in that case, the office becomes bigger.
And actually, as Ramya mentioned, in the High Court, there is a consolidated list in the Delhi High Court, a consolidated list maintained by the registry, which you can, of course, go and apply to. But there is also that direct channel of applying with the judges' chambers directly. In the Supreme Court also, subject to correction, of course, through the entrance test, people are recruited as law clerks. But I think every judge also has that option of keeping 1 or 2 people by direct recruitment.
On their own discretion.
On their own decision. So therefore, I think that keeps that balance between what a judge in that sense wants someone specifically, somebody is identified, maybe the person interned with him or her in the past. So they know the person's good. And, you directly onboard them. And some you take through the general process.
So now, coming to your experiences as a judicial clerk, where did you all undergo clerkship? And if you could share any valuable anecdotes from your clerkship days.
Yes. So if I start talking about anecdotes, I this will be over for the next 5 hours, because it was frankly quite a transformative year for me on the professional front. So I clerked with Justice Rajiv Sahai in law at the Delhi High Court. I clerked with him right after I graduated, and I was with him for about a year. So clerkships typically are from between 1 year to say 2 or 3 years, typically. So some people stay on longer. So I stayed for about a year. And fortunately, when I was with him, he went through different rosters. We sat singly, we sat with the Chief Justice then. He was relatively quite a junior judge at that point in time. I think he had only been elevated for about a year and a half when I joined him. So, I mean, in terms of anecdotes, all I can say is that at the end of the 1 year, I was a very different person compared as a professional compared to when I had joined. And I owe a lot to that 1 year with Justice Endlaw, in terms of inculcating that work ethic in me, in terms of what the profession required. So I think the best part is that even though you're so much younger and the person who you're working with is in that sense so much more experienced, I think it's also, the credit of that person that they still do, to the extent possible, try and treat you like an intellectual equal when it comes to discussions about the cases and deliberations, etc. The ultimate decision is theirs. But otherwise, when you are 23, 24, you've just graduated, you've not even touched, like I think the surface. But, I was always treated in that sense like an equal when he would discuss with me as to what transpired in court or otherwise. And as I said, he was a tough taskmaster. So there was absolutely no let up on the work. Right. But the environment was never toxic. There were times, when I would be told very clearly that my work was not up to scratch. And that was quite very, very, very often in the initial months, particularly when I asked questions like, when is it due? But the best part used to be that, he would always temper that. And any experience that he would recount from his lawyer days would never, ever have an experience, where he did something stupendously brilliant. So he would always tell me about, those mistakes he made or those silly, let's say, strategies that he, followed in those cases in his initial years, which did not work out for him. So the good part was, one never felt really insecure. of course, one was constantly told that you had to perform every single day to be able to like survive in the profession. And the good part was that this would be matched by that person's, work ethic. It was not like you do this and I'm going off somewhere. He would match those hours. He
That's
would
those.
match that, hard work. So it was stupendous. And as Remya mentioned, the best part, if you could ask me, the best takeaway from that 1 year was an abiding faith in the institution. Because when you are a lawyer and when you spend time in court, a lot of the time we spend, say, in the corridors or in the canteen, right, where gossip flows all over the place, and it is quite easy in that sense to besmirch a particular judge or the institution as being compromised. You find it much more easier to withstand this and not have an existential crisis when you worked with someone good within the system. Like we are not, none of us are in that sense in a fool's paradise where we believe the system is perfect. But having worked with that one good human being, that one good individual within the system, it gives you hope for the institution. And it also, in that sense, gives you that institutional fidelity. So if you ask me what was my greatest takeaway from the clerkship, it was that a strong work ethic and an abiding faith in the institution and its future and my role in it. So that was the most important part for me.
So, if I may ask to add to that, did our clerkship with Justice Endlaw help you improve on your due diligence research skills?
Justice, I'm sure Remya knows of this, but Justice Enlaw was, in that sense, very well known for being a stickler in that sense for judicial precedent. So, in that sense, exactly what Remya was saying, what should have been done in terms of deciding whom to work with, every single legal proposition where Justice Enlaw would, effectively want me to research on, he would want something like a judicial precedent which would, apply to the facts of that case. So sometimes I would be very flippant and I would like, this is so obvious, and he would say, forget about it, find me a precedent. So that helped also in a very subconscious level, because it also helped you temper your instinctive responses and helped temper, the way you approached legal issues by in fact referring to material. Because a lot of us, I used to do a lot of parliamentary debating. I never did many moot courts back at Nalsar. I was primarily doing parliamentary debate. So one got very used to those instantaneous responses, that instinctual sort of like a response. So he helped temper that, which in fact was very important, because in court, it's not that instant response which really helps. It's more about how well you can structure your response to the judge, keeping in view the law, keeping in view, what the judge wants. So it helped inculcate that sense of patience and not responding immediately, but thinking about something before one actually, came down to it. So yeah, from that perspective, it really helped.
Ma'am,
So, when it came to anecdotes, I think I've written so much about Justice Palli. He just retired, so I wrote a lot about
yes.
my time with her, including, when she first met me, she found me, I had this big bindi, I had very short hair, so she thought, each of my employers has asked me, has given me this feedback that when we first see you, we assume something else. So she did think of me as some overconfident, a child who's roaming around thinking she's a lawyer already. But the thing about her, and like Amit said, it's so important to not be in toxic offices, because these, judges don't have time for toxicity. There is so much going on in their life that they just can show up and work, work, work. And then they have 3 hours of being a person, like 1 or 2 hours of being a human being with their family, and then the next day comes again and they have to do the same thing all over again. So with Justice Palli, what I noticed is that it was amazing to watch, because I've seen effective, efficient lawyers, but I hadn't seen a judge who could read everything. She would have a very tight day, a schedule which is very tight, but she would never leave the office without finishing her orders for the day, and she would never leave the office without finishing her peshi are the briefs that she has to read for the next day, whatever is listed in the cause list. And she would, for everything, she would say, Remya, just work. Her go-to, and this is something she shared, so I think it's okay to say this out there, put this out there also. For her, the solution to everything comes down to work, and she thinks work is worship. And so there were so many moments, that, because of course you're 2.5 years, there's so much you're experiencing with while in the office of your boss, and whatever it would be, including after, in fact, my father passed away when I was in her office. And I think something that even then, even then because she was so concerned for me, every day her call would come and she would ask me, "Are you okay?" Because obviously she's aware that this is a pain so deep that there's very little you can do to work through it. You just have to wait for time to take its course. But she would check on me and then she would just be like, "Beta, jab ready feel karoge, work, aa jana wapas." And to a large extent, she was right. And I found that it's true. Whenever I feel like I'm stuck somewhere, I just decide, okay, what more can I do to help whatever I'm working on? And it's made me a better lawyer in many ways. It's if I have some curiosity that could be quenched at a moment when I'm feeling very conflicted, I've learned that from her. I've learned many things from her, including how to be a consummate professional. And people have she is somebody who doesn't who is standing in front of her doesn't really matter. It only matters if it's someone young, because then she would be incredibly kind to them and very encouraging to them. She has great respect for preparation. Watching all of that in a judge, there's like a collection of 2.5 years of anecdotes that I couldn't possibly tell you. But yes, I think that article that I told, I did recount that time when she had a lawyer arguing in front of her and she was very serious, and she was extremely professional and asked him, are you done with your arguments, counsel? Is this the entirety of it? She dictated her judgment. And then, ever the consummate professional she was. And then when she comes back to her chamber, she tells me that this is a person who told me I could never make it in law. So I think learning, and then, when I did as a woman, there's so many people who keep telling you law is not a place for women. So many people, law is full of them. My friends have had, when I discuss it with other, female lawyers, they all tell me the same thing, that, there'll be one person who's told them or their parents, law is not a profession for women. So it was a wonderful thing to work with a person like that and to internalize the idea this is all just conjecture, and ultimately your success depends on many things, including your preparation, luck, and optimism. So yeah.
Yeah, wow, what a story. So now, coming to the most important question, at least this is what I feel is the most important one, which is the remuneration part. So if you could talk us through the remuneration part, is there a fixed stipend that is offered to judicial clerks?
Amit,
So,
would you like to take this? Because I think it starts from the lowest in your experience.
correct, correct. So, yeah, it was very right to ask me to answer because I'm a fossil relatively. So, back in 2009, when I joined, I think it was 20,000. But again, in the Delhi High Court. Now, Remya, if I'm correct, it's 60,000 every
Yes.
month. Supreme Court, I think, is about 80,000 or
Yes.
90,000, something in that ballpark. So, frankly speaking, if you look at litigation salaries for a fresh graduate and a clerkship salary, clerkship generally, unless you join one of those chambers that pays like much above the market average, the clerkship stipend or salary that you take home is always on the higher end compared to like a litigation salary. But then again, it depends. In Delhi, a 60K doesn't go all that much as say a 40K probably would go in Bhopal or 50K in go in Bhopal. So I think it ranges from place to place. But my general experience has been that a clerkship is the salary is always far more competitive than what you would get in a lawyer's chamber at that particular point in time. And of
Yes.
course,
But I feel like also that comes with a bit of a drawback, because as a clerk, when you earn that much, then you just don't feel like leaving. Because the challenge is not just the grind of being a lawyer, but also doing it for much less.
correct.
Correct.
But then also you also get the benefit of all those free, sarkari samosas and the chai and the gulab jamun.
What? I didn't get any free sarkari
Related to
samosas.
some of the finest samosas and gulab jamun. So, yeah.
But
Actually, yes, that's true. Lawyers, because they know that this is obviously a tough profession, they are very generous. Each one of my seniors has been very generous when it comes to treating you, or just, giving you some kind of a motivation, material motivation to keep you interested in the profession.
I think Remya's generation of law clerks were far more professional and focused on work because at least in my batch, mostly it was where's the samosa, where's the gulab jamun.
Yeah, I didn't get any samosas as in my judicial clerk. Nothing I got. Because also Justice Pally she's very careful about what she consumes. So all of this was outside the chamber, whatever was being consumed, and nobody wanted to treat us because we were making them work, so nobody wanted to treat us.
I think somehow at that time people were much more focused on food, I believe. So even though Justice Enlaw, I think at that point in time was trying to, I think, cut down, but for some reason there was like an endless supply of samosas and gulab jamuns that would keep flowing into the either the steno cabin where
Oh,
steno
yeah.
would sit either there, or any sort of like somebody or other would keep bringing something in. So
The
yeah.
corridors were full of
Oh
nice.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's true.
Quite happy at that end also. Yeah.
Now, you both started your career as judicial clerks and you were associated with esteemed and some of the finest judges from Delhi High Court. Will you personally recommend judicial clerkship as a career option?
I'll take this first. I would 100%. So 100% if you can and if you are able to, because obviously no one should. This is not set in stone. Wherever your career takes you is your natural flow of life. But if you can get a clerkship and you can. And you have to make sure you make the most of it, because it's an exciting place to be. It is a constitutional post, and you're watching justice being dispensed, and this is the dream of every law student, young lawyer. They want to watch this happen. It's so, but practically speaking, if you were to take away the illusion of what it's like, but you focus on the work, it's agni pariksha. You can't be slow. It's a fast paced environment. You need to be a speed reader, you need to write quickly, you need to be so well versed in how to read a file, because you, like Amit said earlier, most of these judges, because of their grace and their benevolence, don't treat you like somebody who doesn't know anything. They treat you like a person who they can hold a conversation with, because these are isolated positions. They are alone, they're in their chamber, they have to do their best. Now we are people that they sound off things from. So you need to be just as prepared, just as, if not just as, then just a little bit informed when they're speaking with you. At least your first principles need to be right. If they're not, then the job will make you right for it. Eventually, over time, you'll be so surprised that in a span of 5 6 months, somebody gives you a file and you know exactly what is important, you know exactly what needs to be culled out. That I don't think any chamber in the world can teach you, except the chamber of a judge. You go through 50 cases a day, and you go through 50 orders, you go through n number of cases during research. It becomes your second language law. So for a lot of, especially I think, people who weren't living breathing law, there are a lot of colleges where children don't really live breathe law because they don't have faculty, or they don't have the right kind of an educational environment to do it, but they still have that desire to be in law. I feel like this position will make it possible for you, that you can become a person who lives and breathes law, and you can hold a conversation with an excellent jurist, without feeling like you without feeling embarrassed, let's call it.
Yeah. So, I mean, remember a very important point about this conversation, with somebody like that. And that's what I wanted to build on, that as a lawyer, your pinnacle of success in the profession is in terms of how best you are able to articulate an argument that finds favor with the bench. Now, imagine in the beginning of your career, somebody on the bench training you, paying you good money also, in terms of how best you can capture the imagination of, say, a judge. So that I think is very, very important, because when I went and I worked with Justice Enlaw for that 1 year, so many things which I would otherwise not have paid so much heed to in terms of listening to the judge. He would keep saying that repeatedly, that you must learn to listen and not have that flippant answer ready instantly. So seeing that play out in court, the questions that he was asking, the lawyers who were actually responding to those questions and the impact that was making, and those lawyers who were not, just because their argument style was different, or maybe they did not have that sort of training in the beginning. So that is also extremely important, that conversation that you have with the judge in the chamber. Of course, you will not have that intimacy when, say, you are in court and arguing before a judge obviously you've not worked with, but that foundational dynamic of that conversation, you as a lawyer trying to convince and the judge putting those queries to you, so that I think sort of remains. And that one, for me at least, is why I tell everybody who wants to work with me, or even otherwise lawyers who keep asking me what they should do, I say I might have a bias because that's how my career began, and therefore you look at the past with that rose tinted glasses. But conceptually also, it's a great place to start.
Wow.
And just to end, there is that constant joke or that anecdote that goes around that a good lawyer knows the law and a great lawyer knows the judge.
Mm.
Mm.
The end of it, there is wink, wink, because people say what they mean by that is, you're friends with the judge or you have, a drink with the judge in the evening. But there's something much deeper in that. Knowing the judge means what you need to tell the judge as a human being and in the specific judicial, cultural, societal context and background within which the judge operates. So when you work with a judge in that 1 year, you also get to see the human side of that individual, how much that impacts that conception of justice, how that impacts the adjudicatory process. So I think it makes you a more rounded professional. And therefore, I can't recommend it enough, this particular experience.
Jay, I remember there was this one case where it was a matter of an injunction, and the judge, Justice Palli, was all but she'd made up her mind. And I remember that there was a lot of evidence that I felt that she was like it was a back and forth. We were all sitting in court and then we were discussing the matter to such an extent that the next day was a Sunday, and it something struck me and I really wanted her to know. And she said, okay, if you can make your way to my house and explain, make your case, go for it. And I remember driving down at like 9 o'clock because that was the only time she was free on a Sunday morning, and making my case to her. And she's sitting and listening to me in this way. And she said, okay, fine. I said, really? She said, yeah, okay. Well, whatever you said, you've convinced me. And that exchange was so important in also not just feeling valuable as a lawyer, but coming to realize that yes, that's what judges need. Judges need someone who is looking at the material, and they're always looking to fortify their judgment and their reasoning. It's not that they've made up a lot of people think that a judge has made up their mind and are coming to court, but the truth is that the reason the hearing is happening is because they're waiting for you to tell them what needs to be told so that a more complete and holistic decision is made. So I feel a lot of lawyers, lag there. They're not able to take them to the right material. They often don't end up arguing the case in a way which lends credence to it. And so when seeing that happen made me realize a lot of things about what makes you a good lawyer. When you
Right.
go in front of a judge, you realize, okay, what do they need to be shown in order for them to make up their mind? And yes, make up their mind convincingly so that I can convince them to whatever it is I'm trying to say.
So now talking about foreign LLM applications, does clerkship help in foreign LLM applications, the process, or having standing a better chance to making it any of the top Ivy Leagues, if at all you clerk with a sitting judge of that very high court?
Right. So, Remya, can I take this?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
So basically, the general perception is, and which is true to a large extent, is that, see, clerkships, even in foreign jurisdictions, particularly in the US, they are quite prestigious by nature. And they have, of course, had a far longer history of, let's say, people clerking with judges. So particularly in the US, for US LLMs, a clerkship, either with a Supreme Court judge or a High Court judge, can go a long way in sort of establishing your credentials. In the UK also, of course, it makes a difference, maybe not to that extent, but even in the UK, having spent a significant amount of time with a judge, and particularly if it is a judge who is in that sense recognized, say, in his or her domain, that can obviously stand you in very good stead. Which is why if you see, at least at my time in the Delhi High Court and all, clerkships were not so much in tune with, say, getting into, let's say, a good law school abroad. That was more for the Supreme Court clerkship. But now, even in the Delhi High Court, you have a lot of people who will, in fact, look for particular judges who might have, say, a good background in a particular area of law, say constitutional law, or let's say intellectual property rights or arbitration. And they, in fact, choose judges specifically so that after a year or two, when the recommendation comes in, they will then be able to apply to law schools abroad in those particular subject matter specializations. And there, that recommendation from that particular judge can go a long way. So now it's not just the general mantle of that judge, and you're getting that recommendation on the letterhead, but it can go beyond that and help you even further by getting you into specific specialized LLM programs. So yes, it does help a lot.
So now, going ahead with our next question, Well, you both have been a tremendous source of inspiration for me and many. Who was your mentor, if you ever had one?
I have worked with lots of lawyers, and there's something I learned from everyone. Of course, I spend so much time with Justice Purley, so there are a lot of things that I've learned from her. She's a force of nature, so there is a lot to learn there. But this is such a fierce profession that those who you see at the top, those whose names you hear, there is so much to learn from all of them. There is even even if you don't work with them, like I think I enjoy, so I've seen Amit argue in court, and his research, and his research is always top class.
Hmm.
And he always has such a nice and gentle demeanor with the judge, which
I'm sorry.
makes
I'm sorry to interrupt. Please do call Justice Enlaw after this. And
no, it's I always, and his gentle demeanor, it helps. So you take a little bit from everywhere. At least it was like that for me. I watch someone, and I see that it works. Like Mr. Jayant Mehta at the Delhi High Court. He's he's also a very tough taskmaster. But I've seen him joke around in court, and he doesn't take himself so seriously. But as soon as the gown is on and he's in court, there is a whole other person who's there. And I think that's what law kind of demands, because it's so, everyone kind of, especially the new generation, thinks that it should be very easy, and it should be very first nature kind of a thing to practice law. But law is a very different ball game. It needs you to have a part of you that is only reserved for court, and there's a part of you that is who you are in the natural course of things. So there's so many people. Like I work with Anita Shenoy, and she had a lot of environment and human rights matter when I was practicing with her. And again, you would think that she was in a, at the time, she was one of the more well-known AORs. This was before she got elevated. Before she got designated, and she would make these copious notes in her registers next to the drafts. And just watching that was my first office. Just watching that happen. Mr. Pratap Venugopal is one person I worked with. He was also, before he again got designated. All my seniors have got designated at the Supreme Court.
We hope to
So
see you soon with a senior gown now.
no, I hope so.
Yeah.
Mr. Pratap Venugopal is so committed to detail that every single thing. It was a man who's, after 30 years, he wouldn't. Everything was dictated by him. So the diligence, the meticulousness, attention to detail, these are such important skills to have when you're a lawyer. Of course, all those things like reading, of course, it makes you a better lawyer. But there are so many things that contribute to making the grind a grind. And then one day you see the results of it. It's obviously not a straight path, but everything you need to collect, you take from everyone, including Mr. Rohatgi. Mr. Rohatgi has this uncanny ability to, anytime you go to brief him, it'll be something that escapes you. You'll never know that, oh, this was a point I was supposed to talk, but then he will pick up something and it will work. So this law is such an open profession, public profession, that you go to court, you find someone, and there will be something incredible about them, that you will end up regarding them as a mentor for that one thing they left you with.
so, as Remya said, no, I think the profession that way, it's an absolute bounty of, fascinating individuals who you take inspiration from on a daily basis, whether it's, at the bar or on and the bench, because every single day you have that interaction in court. I think one grows as a human being, one grows as a professional. And so I think, as Remya said, there is absolutely no shortage of inspiration in terms of, the people we see day in and day out, at least in the Delhi High Court or in the Supreme Court. And but if you ask me, say, in terms of the mentor, then it would have to be Justice Enlaw. I think it's also a function of, for me, just, being so young at that point in time, and so much about what I view the profession as today, I owe to that 1 year with Justice Enlaw. So as I said, that faith in the institution. But beyond that, if you ask me, my fundamental premise, my approach to matters as a lawyer, the way I look at the profession, all of that to a large extent was structured fundamentally in that 1 year with him. And it was done seamlessly. As Remya mentioned, it's just these normal daily interactions that you have. It's not like you have a session 1 hour a day where they sit and tell you this is what you should do in life. These are all those random conversations you have in the middle of this extremely hectic day. So therefore, if you ask me, that sort of a intimate working environment for those many hours and those daily barrage of 50, 60, 70 cases, which one did at this very close level. So yes, I mean, I'm fortunate to have had, a mentor like Justice Endlaw, and can't thank him enough for all that he's done for me.
And lastly, what would be your piece of advice for all the law students, lawyers, and other professionals who wish to pursue judicial clerkship like you both have?
So I think in terms of a skill set, as I mean, Remya has made it quite clear that you would require at least to train yourself or prepare yourself, with a certain level of skill set, a particular kind. One, your research has to be very, very good, your research skills, because many a times you have 50, 60 cases a day, and the judge may not be assisted at the bar, let's say, by a very precise judgment or what is the correct position in law. So it's easy if, let's say, you get a research proposition and you have 4 days to work on it and then come back to someone. But as I told you in the beginning, I asked when is it due. It was actually due in the next 2 hours, because that's when the order has to be
Yeah.
taken. So you don't have that luxury of time. So you should be able to, inculcate the skill of, say, rapid research. You should also be someone who is comfortable with staying updated on the law. So one thing I realized in my very first week with Justice Endlaw was that unless I read up on judgments on a daily basis, there is no way I can survive in the chamber. Because if I keep going back and looking individually every time he asks me, I wouldn't be able to do it within that timeline. So then, you sort of inculcate that habit of sitting in the evening and reading up judgments or case law. And I used to hate it. I used to abhor it, because I was more, philosophy, science fiction. I was a more freer individual in that sense. And then, but there was no other way to survive. So I had to, inculcate that. But even though I hated doing it, now in hindsight, that's helped tremendously, because when you get, it becomes a habit. So therefore, that is one thing you need to stay updated. And as Remya mentioned, you need to be able to do a lot of reading in a very short time frame. And when it comes to proofreading or maybe putting in basic drafts, you need to be able to churn out a lot of material in a very compressed time space and do it with a lot of quality and finesse. Because ultimately, you see any judgment, when you read a judgment, if there is a typographical error, a grammatical error, or something wrong, it just strikes you as something very bad. Like it's something, I don't know. It's not something that you expect. Now imagine somebody having to churn out 50 daily orders, two or three, reported large judgments. So it's a very, difficult task. And therefore, as a law clerk, though of course you're not really doing that intellectual heavy lifting to the extent the judge is doing so, but that output at the end of the day, you also bear that sense of responsibility to ensure that it is absolutely perfect. So from the highest level of ensuring that conceptually the conclusions are correct, the record is correct, to the most rudimentary things like checking for typographical errors, which we all know how easy they are to just get slipped into a draft. So these are the fundamental skills, and I would say at the level of a human being, you also need to inculcate a strong sense of loyalty
Hmm.
for the individual that you work with. Because as I said, they need to navigate a lot in terms of work. They need to navigate a lot in terms of dealing with their staff, right? Therefore, there
Yeah.
must be a sense of loyalty to the output and to the individual that you must, sustain, because it's a very, very intimate working environment. And unlike in court, where you have that environment in the office, but then you spend the larger part of the day in a public place like court, with a judges, it's just the chamber and the courtroom, and it's a very close knit circle within which you operate. So it's that sort of like a different ball game. So yeah, that's what I think you should have fundamentally.
I love that. That's so real. And I one more thing is that staff of every high court is paid by the government. It's the staff of the high court. They outlive. They are in that position for longer than maybe the judges. So for them the stakes are maybe not as high. Of course, if it's a loyal staff, it's a different matter. But for them, stakes are not as high. And I can't tell you the immense nature, the responsibility on a judge's shoulders, so immense. Because like he said, this is a profession of pedantics. So there will be a lot of people sitting and reading that judgment and making sure that, okay, the first, not just the legal principles, but also the language, the grammar, the details of the cases, whether the precedent quoted actually sits in the facts of that case. There's so much going on in just one order, one judgment. It's immense. That responsibility is not easy to bear. And when I started off, it's like being thrown in the deep end of a swimming pool and you have no idea how to swim. But there's so much darkness, and over time you understand what you can do to make things work for the judge and for yourself. So of course all the things that Amit said, but also you have to realize that you are a facilitator. Ultimately you're a very efficient facilitator, so you have to be someone who knows the judge's voice, who speaks the way the judge speaks, because it's not about your language, it's not about you proofreading to see how much it sounds like you, it's about how much does it sound like the judge. So don't impose your ways of talking, as long as you keep your personality away and show up to just make sure that the day is easy. So you write, you become familiar with how they write, you become familiar with how they articulate their thoughts, and that's how you will be an asset to that office. That's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is these judges have come after years of grind. So they are very efficient, competent, capable people. And whoever you are, no matter what your background is, because they don't have the time to ponder over your background, what they need is someone competent in front of you. And most importantly, someone who's willing to work hard. The moment they see it's a person who works hard, for them, it is a big boon, because someone who's loyal, works hard, is committed to the work just as they are, is all that they need to feel a little secure in what they're doing. So I've seen a lot of judges, so higher judiciary and district court, lower judiciary exams. Once people succeed in those exams, they have a training period. So when these trainee judges go and sit in the high courts, I've seen trainee judges who did not really want to work. They would be sitting right next to a high court judge and just be unwilling to put in those kinds of hours. And then be surprised that the judge is not giving them importance and is giving importance to the law researcher instead. But why is that? Because the law researcher is just showing up and working. And that's all a judge needs. Judge just needs someone who's willing to work hard. So just do those two things along with all the very, very important things Amit has said, and you'll be golden.
Well, before we wrap this segment up, at the outset, I wish to apologize for the two of you. Today is a Saturday, and sorry for spoiling your Saturday night plans. You only get one day to spend time with you, your loved ones, with your family. So, to all the viewers who are watching, wow, what a wonderful session it was. I can safely sum it up and say one of the finest sessions that we've recorded on the Virtual Amicus. So grateful to you, Amit sir and Remya, for taking out time for doing this for us. A very important topic. Nobody covered this on our channel till date. I mean, nobody was there to tell us back in the day when we were in law school about judicial clerkship, how to apply, where to apply, and how to go about it. In fact, I was not even aware of this. So, to all the viewers who are watching, our email is mentioned on the channel. Feel free to write to us in case if you have any queries, and we'll be more than happy to assist you on the same. And you can send across your questions on the email that is mentioned. Anything that you wish to say as parting words and last words before we wrap this up?
I mean, I'm just thankful you sat and listened to us speak for so long, and I'm just grateful. Thank you for having us. I'm so happy that we were able to do this, and it's always a pleasure to be talking to Amit and Jay. We've got to know each other now, and I'm happy to have made your acquaintance. So this was a wonderful opportunity for me. Thank you.
No, but thank you, Jay, and thank you, Remya, for being there. And it brought back so many memories, because all the stuff that Remya said, it was such a wonderful blast from the past, in the sense of those beautiful days. And of course, as I said, we look at the past with rose-tinted glasses, but objectively speaking, I think these were such transformative years for us. And therefore, it's good that we're able to speak about it, so that maybe more people can benefit from the way this institution is structured. And we can have more and more whatever good law clerks meeting equal judges and having a great time together.
So thank you, Amit sir. Thank you, Remya, for all your valuable insights. It's goodbye for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.